You know, I'm glad you're here, and I've been praying for you for quite some time, so let me look at your beautiful faces here. Okay, let me see everybody, because I've been praying for you, and I want to ask you this. I do this often just for fun. How many of y'all have ever seen a nun before? And Sound of Music and Sister Act doesn't count, okay? So, all right, a good number of you, because, you know, sometimes when I go places, I ask that question, and, like, nobody raises their hands like crickets, and people are getting kind of awkward, you know? And so one of the girls would be like, girl, what you got going on there? What's this about, right? So sometimes I'm out in public, especially in the airports, and do you ever people watch in airports? Okay, have you ever watched people watch people in airports? It's funny, right? So sometimes it happens, people just kind of look at me, and especially around Halloween, they don't know if I'm dressed up, okay? So they're not really sure what they should say. So a couple years ago, I was at Walmart, and I was minding my own business as I usually am when these things happen to me, and I just happened to be standing near the Halloween candy, but I didn't realize it, okay? So I've got my grocery list out here, and I'm like, you know, looking at my grocery list, and have you ever had that kind of feeling where you know somebody's staring at you, like you could feel their eyes boring into your face, you know? So I could feel this guy like staring at me, and I looked up, and this guy is just like not even trying to hide it, he's like, and I'm over here, and I was like, hi, hi, and he walks over to me like this, he goes, that is a very detailed Halloween costume. And I started laughing, like, oh, I said, I'm not dressed up. I'm a real nun. And he's like, oh, and he kind of like walked away, you know, like maybe on aisle 7 he could find this fabulous polyester number, I don't really know, okay? So, but you know, in my life, we're gonna talk about some things today, but one of the things that I love, obviously aside from Jesus Christ, is sports. Any sports fans in the house today? Okay. Did you watch the World Cup? Any World Cup watchers? All right, okay, so I'm not really a soccer player. I get the whole ball net thing, right? But there was something about the World Cup. I laid on the couch for hours eating popcorn, watching men with no body fat run up and down a field, right? And I'm watching them kick the goals in. I'm like, I don't even know who you are, man. That was awesome, you know, and I loved it. And we know for the whole month, the world was transfixed by this game, right? That's all anybody was talking about. And I mean, everybody was so embarrassed for Brazil, right? Because they're the host nation. They've won the World Cup 5 times. They're on the brink to win a 6th one, and they get humiliated by Germany. And I felt like, was it more charitable to turn that game off? Because it was like watching a high school team. It was kind of embarrassing. Like, they're just being crushed, right? And then Germany gets to the final, and we just love the game. Like, we love excellence. We love excellence. If you watched the Olympics in 2012 in London, when Michael Phelps won every gold medal there ever was, like even in long jump, he was winning gold medals in other events, right? Because he's Michael Phelps. And there I was again. It's kind of a trend. I'm laying on the couch for 2 weeks eating popcorn, watching people with no body fat win medals, and I'm just amazed by it. And we love the story. We love the human interest stories. We love the mother of 3 who won a silver medal in swimming, and we love people that overcome obstacles because we love greatness. We're just transfixed by it. And I noticed in the course of all my bags of popcorn that Nike's a very good corporation because not only do they make great products, they have brilliant marketing strategy. So during that course of 2 weeks, I just kind of lay there and I was watching this, you know, event after event. And I noticed that there was one particular commercial that Nike played again and again and again and again. And at first I thought it was kind of cute, you know, I was like, oh, that's pretty clever. But then when I actually watched the commercial, I was like, that is brilliant because it speaks right to the heart of what it means to be human. So I want to show you that commercial here.
There are no grand celebrations here, no speeches, no bright lights. But there are great athletes. Somehow we've come to believe that greatness is reserved for the chosen few, for the superstars. The truth is, greatness is for all of us. This is not about lowering expectations. It's about raising them for every last one of us. Because greatness is not in one special place. And it is not in one special person. Greatness is wherever somebody is trying to find it.
I like that commercial for a number of reasons, but I've seen that so many times with audiences, and I love to watch the very end when that little boy is like going off the high dive, and all the women in the audience are like, oh my gosh, and the guy's like, go do it, kid, man, jump off, right? So he jumps off. But I love the commentary of the commercial, because as you notice, and you can see that on YouTube, you notice that it shows London Street and London Avenue and London this, and they're playing all these different sports. And I love because the commentator says, greatness is not just found in London, the city for the Olympics for 2 weeks out of the year. Greatness is found wherever someone is trying to find it. And I love that because that is exactly parallel to the spiritual life. And I'm sure you have some really beautiful churches here. I heard your cathedral's amazing. And I bet if you go inside, you're going to see some amazing stained glass windows and some beautiful statues. And sometimes our temptation is this: that's great for them, but that has nothing to do with me right now as I sit in this room. And actually, that's not true. Because sanctity is not just found in stained glass windows and cathedrals. It's not just found in statues and churches. Sanctity is found in this room today as we sit here. Because this is the stuff saints are made of. This is why we love excellence. This is why we're made for excellence, because our Father is great. And many times in our life, we will settle for mediocrity. We'll settle for it. We'll just say, you know what? Man, my life's not going to get any better. It's not going to get any better. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Or as we get older, my marriage is not going to get any better. My kids are never going to come back to the church. My spouse is never going to change. My parents are never going to change. And we just kind of we live at this kind of gray area of mediocrity. But yet, there's something within us that we're just not satisfied with that. Something just keeps welling up within us, and it's a desire for happiness, this desire for greatness, that ultimately, if it's led to its source, it leads us to God himself. But so often what happens is we don't understand a lot of things in our life, and one of the things we don't understand is that we don't understand what it means to be human. So I want to show you, I've got some just definitions of this question of what it means to be human. And this is actually out of your catechism. And this is a very basic theological, philosophical definition of what it means to be human. Because I just want to talk about that for a second. Because why we see so many people today acting like animals, that's the greatest crisis in the church right now, in the world, is what does it mean to be human? We don't know. We have no idea. So people are acting like animals. The world is just destructing. It's like imploding because we don't know what it means to be human. So this is a very simple definition. I'm just going to run through it for you, but I'm going to read the whole thing for you, and then I'm going to take it apart. So if you looked in the back of your catechism, the green book, and you looked in the glossary, you're going to see the word human person. And you're going to see some of these characteristics underneath that title. And it says that the human person is made in the image and likeness of God, that we are someone, not something. We are a union of soul and body. We're capable of knowledge, self-possession, and freedom, and we're made for communion and relationship. Okay? So let me just talk about that for 1 second. Every single person ever conceived is made in the image and likeness of God. Who is God? God is love. God knows himself. God loves. We are made in the image and likeness of God. We're given an intellect to think and a will to love, to pursue all that is good, true, and beautiful, what is truly good, true, and beautiful. Which is very different than, say, different animals, right? Anybody have a dog at home? You guys have dog lovers? Okay, so when I lived in Seattle many years, and we had this dog, and when we got him from the Humane Society, he was this big, and then he grew up to be like this big. We're like, whoa, that's huge, right? So he weighed over 100 pounds, and when he would take me for walks, thank you very much, he was always glad to take me for a walk, and so when he would come running at you, I mean, you got a 100-pound dog running at you when you open the front door, right? And he's like, hi, so happy to see you, and I kind of braced myself for the impact of 100 pounds of dog, and he would jump up on me, and he could put his paws on my shoulders, like he's just this massive dog. Well, unfortunately, our dog, Aaron, first of all, he thought he was a hairy person. But secondly, he thought he was a lap dog. Have you ever had a 100-pound dog think he's mistaken, he thinks he's a lap dog? So we'd be like trying to climb in our lap, and sometimes we'd be sitting on the couch, and we'd have guests over, and we'd have like snacks or something. And Aaron would try to come over and eat off my plate. And I'm like, this is embarrassing. I'm like, stop it. I kind of push him away. I'm trying to talk. Yes, yeah. And you're pushing like this 100-pound dog away off your plate, you know. And then he's like, oh no, girl, you're not doing that to me. So he'll like muscle his way in there, and he's trying to eat my food off my plate. And after a while, I just get exasperated, and I just push him like, Aaron, stop it. And he kind of slinks off like this, you know. And he curls up into a little ball until like the next snack. But Aaron, our dog, is not having a conversation in his head. He's not saying, is it my breath? What is it about me? How come she doesn't like me? You know, everything, I take her for walks, I do all these things for her, and when I want a snack, he's not having this interior dialogue in his head because he's a dog. Now, in our life, when people reject us, what is the dialogue that's going on in our head? Why are they saying that stuff about me? Man, why did they put that on Facebook? I can't believe she did that. Like, I've done everything for them. This whole different dialogue we have because we're humans. We can ration. Every single person is someone to love and to be loved, not something to be used. This is why, intrinsically speaking, you don't like to be used. And I think all of us on our life have certain people that call us or text us or come to see us only when they want something. And we're like, phone rings, we see that person, we're like, I know what they want. and we don't like it. And when I lived in Seattle, I ran a daycare for little kids after school. And little kids are amazing because they're very, very wise. They teach you a lot of things. But we had homework time at our daycare after school. And sometimes the second graders would decide, the girls would say, okay, we're all going to do our math homework. So the second graders would kind of commandeer this whole long table, and they'd get up in little stations that spread apart, and they would set up their math, okay? And then what they would do, they open their math books and their paper and just get everything just right. And then they would take these elaborate barriers, like these folders, and they would put them around the math homework, right? I think they spent more time building the barriers around the math homework than they did doing the math. They did that so nobody would copy off them because they don't want to be used for their math homework, right? But inevitably, one of the little kids, sometimes one of the little boys would kind of come, and he'd be like, he's got his math homework, and he's like, hey girl, what's up, you know? And she's like, go away. She pushes him away, go away, because she's done with her math homework, and she does not want to be used for her math answers because he has not done it, and she has. And she knows he doesn't like her at school, he just wants to use her for her math. And she doesn't like it, right? Now, that's a very simple example of this dislike of being used, but the stakes get higher as we get older. And again, and I say this very reverently, many times we will settle for being used in relationships because we think we don't deserve any better. Sometimes we're afraid to be alone. Sometimes our domination for pleasure, it obscures any sort of righteousness, any sort of truth that we just have to consume people or allow people to consume us and use us. And we say, well, I don't deserve anymore. And that's exactly where Christ wants to come in to heal us. We are also a union of soul and body. Every single person is unique, precious, and unrepeatable. So I say this often, and it still astounds me every time I say it. As I'm looking at your faces here, y'all can't see your faces, but I can, okay? Think about this for 1 second. From the beginning of time, when God began creating, he creates Adam and Eve, right? So God goes through history, and now there's like 6.5 billion people alive, or a very small portion of the population that's actually alive. And then, you know, if God still creates, so there's been trillions of people that God has created. And if there ever comes a time in creation when God says, creation is consummated, I'm no longer going to create human beings, I'm done. From that beginning, from Adam and Eve, all the way to the very, very end, if God ever stops creating people, God never, ever, ever recycles or reincarnates or recreates a single person. That's why we love creativity. Because God is so creative. Imagine the creativity. So look at your neighbor, right? Look at the person sitting to your left. Look him in the eye, left, right. God will never, ever recycle them. He will never recreate them. Completely unique, precious, and unrepeatable. Made in the image and likeness of God. This is why, my dear friends, the pro-life issue is not a political issue. It's at the heart of what it means to be human. And our bodies and our souls are so incredibly awesome that they're going to be together forever, for all eternity. So now when we talk about what happens, what do we call the term when your soul leaves your body, you are what? Dead. You're dead, right? And if you've ever heard a Catholic philosopher, Dr. Peter Kraft, he says that this very fact that we're united in soul and body, that this truth is so important to us, this is why dead people and ghosts scare us, he says. So if you look at Halloween coming up, what's Halloween about? Dead people and ghosts, and we find that scary. And if you've ever been to a funeral, I'm sure we all been to a funeral, and you know you go pay respects to the person who's in the casket, and it's at the church or it's at the funeral home, and you walk up to the front and there's the casket with the open casket, and you see your loved one or you see this person, and they look like they're asleep, but you know intrinsically they're not asleep. You know that something's very, in a sense, wrong, because that person, maybe you just saw them a week before, and now they're not there. They're there, but they're not there, right? And some people find that very terrifying. Or if you hear stories of people seeing ghosts, seeing a spirit without a body is very terrifying to us. Our bodies are so good and beautiful that at the end of time, God will raise them from the dead. And we will have them forever. I mean, an improved version, thanks be to God, right? But a version nonetheless. Which is why, when you see Jesus appearing to the disciples, like on the road to Emmaus, like they don't recognize him. He comes through the doors when the disciples are out of fear, like we're all out of fear a lot of times. We're such cowards sometimes. And Jesus is not afraid of that. He walks right through the door and he confronts them and wishes them peace because he wants to heal them. Part of what it means to be human, as we talked about before, that we're given an intellect and a will, but that we're made for freedom. This is why we love freedom. This is why we love it. We yearn to be free, but freedom in what? So often the definition of freedom says this. It says, I'll make a common definition, I guess you could say, which is more like license, says, I'm going to do whatever I want, however I want, with whomever I want, and don't tell me what to do. Or said every second grader ever, you're not the boss of me, okay? Now, that's great. I guess that's one form of freedom. But there's a saying that if you do whatever you want to do, there will come a day when you do the things you never thought you would. And if you've ever seen those reality TV shows, like I know A&E has one, it's called Scared Straight or Beyond Scared Straight, okay? Where they take teens who are already in trouble, they're already smoking pot, they're already selling drugs, they're already having sex, they're already skipping school, they're creating problems, they're already violent. And the parents, usually it's a single mom, okay? They are just fit to be tied. So sometimes what they do, instead of sending them right to juvenile hall, they'll actually send them to a program where they go and visit the state pen for a weekend. Like, welcome to the state pen, people, okay? So especially the men's prison, you talk about some broken people. Wow. The stuff that happens at a penitentiary that they'll never show you on TV because it's just too violent and too brutal. So they send these kids in there, and usually the kids are like, oh man, what's up, I'm a gangster, right? So they sit them down with us at a table, and then they bring in one of the penitentiary members, one of the prisoners, and they're usually like all tatted up and stuff, and they're very smart because they choose the same prisoner with the same story as that young man. And they sit them down face to face and they have a conversation. And the conversation usually goes something like this. The prisoner's like, man, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're free. Why are you making such stupid choices? Your choices, that's how I ended up here. And I don't want to see you here. You have your whole life ahead of you. You don't have to be an addict. You don't have to be broken. You don't have to be selling drugs. Man, don't do it. I don't want to see you here. And there's like silence from the kid that's sitting there usually crying, right? Because it's so startling. True freedom ultimately is not doing whatever I want, however I want. Don't tell me what to do. That's licensed, very immature. True freedom, I guess St. Thomas Aquinas would call it, being able to see what is good and to choose what is good. So I can see your goodness. And the more that I see your goodness and I can choose what is good for you, the more I love you and the more free I am. Because love isn't, we get this idea of love, right? This just constantly bombards all of us, my generation, your generation, and the love says this, it's like, baby, I love you. No, I mean it, I do. I love you. But I love you as long as you're convenient and fun, and we have a good time, and you satisfy me. But, if there ever comes a time where you're no longer fun and you're inconvenient, or you make me suffer, well, I guess it just didn't work out. And our society, and I think many of us in this room, and I know myself, I lived like that for a long time, it just shatters our hearts. And it's like this society is just covered with the hearts of broken people. Because that's lust, that's using. True love is being able to see what is good and to choose what is good for you, even if that comes at the cost of myself. And so often we sanitize the crucifixion, right? Sometimes we see the cross, we see Jesus hanging, and there's like this skinny white guy with like this little trickle of blood coming out, But have you ever seen The Passion of the Christ? Have you seen that? Did you know Mel Gibson, when he directed that movie and they produced it, he said actually they studied Roman crucifixions for a long time before they filmed the scourging and the crucifixion scene. And get this, if you've seen that movie, you know how brutal that is. I mean, people in the theater got up and walked out because it was so just beyond anything we could possibly imagine because we're not used to that. Mel Gibson said they actually toned down the violence for the movie. He said the original scourging and crucifixion was so traumatic that all of us in our brains have a trauma point where our brains just kind of shut off. He said it would have been too traumatic. As you watching the movie, you would have just your brain would have just shut off. But he said they made it realistic enough for you to be open to what was happening and to be able to receive it. So that the Romans, that the way they controlled the Roman Empire was through violence, through terror. One of the ways they did that was by crucifying people because it was a horrific way to die. So what they would do is they would strip you naked when they scourge you, and that they would tie you to a pole and they'd lash you with a leather rope that had metal hooks at the end that would tear your flesh out. And then what they would do is they'd watch you very closely. And they'd see just about the point you're about to die, and then they would stop and they'd leave you there and let you live. And then if you revived a little bit, they'd continue again. If you survived that, they would put a cross on your shoulder, a beam on your shoulder, and you would carry it, and it wouldn't be like on the outskirts of town. They paraded you right through town. It was a way of controlling people, saying, if you defy the Roman government, this is what's going to happen to you too. We will do this to you as well. And sure enough, they nailed you to the cross. They stripped you naked as a final kind of humiliation. We see Jesus with a loincloth on because there's no way we could handle that. But you're crucified naked, you're literally just out there. And they crucify you, and you actually, surprisingly enough, don't die of blood loss. You die of asphyxiation. So here's this man that's not a story we tell kids at Christmas time, but a man like us in all things but sin, where Jesus comes in search of us. And he hangs there on the cross naked, giving completely, entirely of himself. That's why we can easily say that he loves us, because he didn't have to, right? Why he did that to bring us into communion with him, communion and relationship. And I bet right now, I'm just going to ask you, if you think in your mind of some of your favorite memories, like just right now, if you think of just, I don't know, in the life that you've lived, what are like one or two of your most favorite memories? A lot of times they come up first, whatever comes to your mind first. I would bet you, if you told me later what they were, I bet you that they have a lot to do with communion and relationship. Maybe it was the time, I don't know, maybe it was Christmas morning. Maybe it was just hanging out with a good friend that you just really love. For parents, a lot of times it's the day they get married or the day that their child's born. And you say to yourself in those moments, you say, man, I wish time would stop right here. And I wish this moment would never end. I just wish it would stop. I just wish I could live like this love, this communion, this experience that I'm having. I wish it would go on forever. I do believe, and I'm not a theologian, but I do believe those are small like windows into heaven, where when we choose God, if we live a life with God and we see God face to face, it never will end. And it just gets better and better at every moment. It's hard to even imagine, because that's what we're called for. This is why we long for it. So you might be saying to yourself, well, that's great, sister, okay? And society has a wonderful way of kind of telling us a lot of things that will bring us, happiness or freedom or joy. And so you see here I've got just kind of a lot of different examples of what society tells us will make us happy. And there's nothing wrong with being beautiful. There's nothing wrong with winning the Super Bowl. There's nothing wrong with being successful or having money or being famous. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that's my everything, if that is is that the whole thing in my life that I'm searching for? If that's my everything, then I'm going to end up with nothing. Because it doesn't last. And I think we all know that. If there's something that you wanted for Christmas like 3 years ago that you had to have, like you had to have this, so often we don't even remember what it was, right? And we get that. We have these moments of kind of satisfaction, and they're fleeting. They satisfy us for a little bit, but then we're like, I want something more. I want something more. Or it might look like something like this. It's a very clever Adidas basketball commercial that I found.
Let me tell you something. If you took away the money, if you took away the fame, the spotlight, if you took away the lifestyle and all the things that come with it, if you took away all the flash, what would you have left? Everything.
Interesting. I mean, that's very interesting, right? Because he loves basketball. I mean, I love sports, but is that everything? Is it everything? I think if you even looked at somebody like Michael Jordan, one of the best players, probably LeBron James, they'll go down as the best players that ever played the game. But it's not everything, right? It passes away. So where does Christ want to come right into those areas of our life where we're just clinging to things that won't satisfy? And I don't know, I'm going to skip ahead of a slide here. Any Chronicles of Narnia fans here? Do you guys like Chronicles of Narnia? Okay. So a couple years ago, I read this series from The Magician's Nephew all the way to the end. And this is obviously a movie still from the movie The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which is one of the books there. And I was really captivated by the story of Aslan. As you know, Aslan is the Christ figure of this kingdom called Narnia. And in this kingdom, these two brothers and two sisters are invited into this land where they're kings and queens, and they have all these adventures. And it's amazing what the people of Narnia say about Aslan, who's like the Christ figure of the story. They always say, he's good, he's not tame. He's not tame, but he's good. Because he's always showing up in all these like dark places and doing these unexpected things. And I remember reading the story, and I was just very overcome very deeply when Aslan would confront people. Because he would always tell them the truth. But it was such a way that it was a truth that elicited beauty. And I had never seen that before. And sometimes I would read the story. It's a children's story. And I'm like crying my eyes. I'm like, this is not normal. Okay, I'd put the book down, you know. But I was listening to a talk, by Dr. Peter Kreeft. I just loved him. And he said, it's his opinion. He was talking about C.S. Lewis, the author of the series. Dr. Peter Kreeft said, in his opinion, he believes that in all of literature, that the character of Aslan is probably most like Jesus Christ. And I was like, oh, that probably makes sense, right? So this particular story is Eustace. Eustace is the cousin, the icky cousin of the kids, right? And Eustace is a little brat. Nobody likes him, okay? He's always complaining. He's always criticizing. He's always finding fault with people. And he's never, ever, ever, ever happy. And his cousins don't like him at all, but they have to visit him one summer. And they're hanging out in his room. And there's a painting on the wall of a ship at sea. And all of a sudden it becomes real. And the water pours into the bedroom, right? And they're getting wet and the water's rising. And all of a sudden it sucks them all out, including Icky Eustace, into Narnia. Now Icky Eustace is now in Narnia and quickly makes enemies of everybody in Narnia because nobody likes that, okay? So the ship is shipwrecked and the kids have to kind of repair the ship, and Eustace is supposed to be helping them, but he doesn't care about anybody but himself. He would be the epitome of, let me take a selfie, okay, that'd be Eustace, all right? So he kind of goes off by himself, and he kind of goes on and he sees like these little gold coins. And he happens upon further, and what he realizes is that he stumbled upon a dragon's lair. And C.S. Lewis, I love this, he said, thinking greedy dragon thoughts in his heart and falling asleep on the dragon's lair, Eustace became a dragon. So he woke up, Exhibit A, this gigantic, ugly dragon. And he didn't know that about himself first. He thought a dragon was following him. But after a while, he realized that he was a dragon and that nobody could help him. It was stuck like that. Well, the kids had to leave the island and they realized their cousin's still a dragon. That's kind of a moral dilemma. And they didn't know what to do. And one morning, Eustace comes back to them at the camp, and he's a boy again, and they're like, what happened to you? And he said this. He said, I was out walking in the hills, and I was approached by a lion. And the lion took me to this clear, cool pool, and it had marble steps going down into the pool. And the lion said to me, you have to undress to get in. And Eustace said, well, I'm a dragon. I don't have any clothes on, but these scales are kind of ugly. So he's like, I'll try to get them off. So he took his dragon claw and he began to scratch it himself. And he scratched a whole layer of dragon skin off. So he stepped forward to get into the pool, and he looked in the pool and he saw that he was still a dragon. He saw in his reflection. So he's like, So he goes for it again. I mean, it sounds familiar. If there's things about your life that you don't like or about yourself, so often we scratch at ourselves, right? So he's scratching, and this whole other layer falls off, and he steps down to get into the pool, and he sees that he's still a dragon. So this is it, the third time he's going for it. So he takes his claws, he scratches out of entire self, and sure enough, another layer of dragon skin falls off. And he's thinking, surely now I can get into the pool. So he takes a step down to get into the pool, and he sees that he's still a dragon. He cannot fix himself. He can't heal himself. So Eustace said, well, the lion looked at me, and the lion said to me, you will have to let me undress you. And Eustace said by then he was so frustrated that he didn't know what else to do, so he just laid down. Like, we have times in our life where we're like, all right, fine, God, fine. I've done it my way, fine, do it your way. So Eustace laid down flat, and Aslan took his lion's claw and went right for his heart. And Eustace said the first cut into his heart went so deep, he said, I thought it pierced my heart. And Aslan began to just rip away all the deep scales and all the deep skin. And Eustace said it was so painful that the only way he could stand it was because he knew at some point it would be over. And then it was over. And Eustace sat up, and behind him was the most disgusting, thick, ugly, ugly bunch of dragon skin he'd ever seen. He said it was far more ugly and hideous than anything he could possibly imagine or anything he could get off on his own. But before he could look at himself to see what happened to him, Aslan picked him up and threw him in the pool. So he said, I was shocked by the clear water. He's like, I just began to swim. He said, and I looked down and I realized that I was a boy again. C.S. Lewis wrote that Eustace was never the same after that. He was profoundly different. And he said, yeah, every now and then he would struggle with some of his old tendencies and his old faults, but he was profoundly different because he had an encounter with, ultimately, Jesus Christ. And what we have to understand about that story, I mean, it's an amazing story, but see, Aslan wasn't hurting Eustace as a boy, but taking off the masks can be really painful. And we all wear masks, do we not? All of us have the things we hide behind because we're just so afraid. And I love, what St. John Paul II, any St. John Paul II fans here? You guys like him? Okay. I love, this is one of my favorite quotes from him. He says, we are not the sum of our weaknesses and our failures. We are the sum of the Father's love for us and our real capacity to become the image of his Son. So you might be saying to yourself, as you're listening, well, sister, you're a nun, you're like supposed to say stuff like this, like that's what you do, okay, right? And probably when you were born, like there were glittery angels and like festive songs and whatnot, okay? So not quite. Because I think, you might be surprised that you and I have a lot in common. Maybe we have this in common, maybe we don't. But actually, I began life as an unplanned pregnancy. My biological parents were 17 years old. They were high school students. And I was the fruit of their union together. And my mom, I don't know my biological parents at all, but I do believe in my own heart that my mother at one point thought of aborting me. But for whatever reason, that 17-year-old girl, she was probably scared to death, she chose life for me. And she gave me up for adoption. And when I was 3 months old, I was adopted, and the first picture that I have with my family, my mom and dad that adopted me, I was under the Christmas tree. It came at Christmas time. My mom said I was a Christmas present to the family that year. So I got older, and I was looking through our photo album pictures, and I just happened to notice that I have an older brother, that there were never any pictures of my mom pregnant. And I was like, right? So we're in the car one day, and I'm in the back seat, and I'm actually very quiet by nature, so this must have been a big deal for me to even say this. I said, Mom, how come there's no pictures of you pregnant with me? And the front seat got very, very quiet. And my mom looked at my dad, and she turned around and she said, honey, your dad and I, we wanted to have children very much, but we couldn't. For some reason, we just couldn't have children. So we prayed to God that we could adopt the children, and we adopted your brother. And then many years later, we got to adopt you. And your biological parents were so young, and they loved you very much. But they wanted you to have a good home, so they gave you up for adoption, and we got to adopt you. And to be 7 years old to hear that message, now I know I'm a grown woman, I know the message, but part of me was just, it's kind of shocking to find out, like, oh my gosh, these people that I live with are not really biologically related to me. And I thought it meant there was something wrong with me. So I began to keep secrets. There's a saying in the 12-step program, recovery programs, that says, we're only as sick as our secrets. When I was 10 years old, I had my innocence taken from me by an older boy, and I didn't tell anybody, I kept it a secret. And that event caused so much pain in my life, the only thing I knew how to do to get out of it was to drink. I began drinking at 12 years old. When I was 13, another older boy took my innocence completely away from me, and I didn't tell anybody. And from then on, my life grew darker and darker and darker. But you know what? I kept this looking really good. Because I thought if I was skinny enough and pretty enough and funny enough and good enough in volleyball, you wouldn't notice that this was a complete mess. Because see, I was scared of this. I was scared of my secrets. So by the time I was 21, I was playing volleyball, kind of like Dave said, I was a Division I college volleyball player. If you watched the Olympics a few years ago, and if you watched Misty May and Carrie Walsh play, and they won a 3rd gold medal in beach volleyball, I used to play against Misty May in college. So she's an All-American setter at Long Beach State, and I played at Nevada, and they always won. Don't get me wrong, they always smoked us. They're an amazing team. But so here I'm playing Division I college volleyball, and I wanted to work at ESPN. That was my goal in my life. And I was going to be somebody and don't tell me what to do, because I'm going to do what I want to do. And I had it looking pretty good, right? But on the inside, I was really broken. By the time I was 21, I was already an alcoholic. And I remember one morning, I woke up, and if you know anything about addiction, okay, some of us probably have addictions here as we sit here to a lot of things. Addiction goes like this. You say to yourself, you indulge in your behavior, and you say, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. No, I mean it this time, I'm really not. I'm not going to do it. And you mean it. You totally mean it, right? But then all the pain from our life, all the anxiety, all the fear comes up again, and a lot of times because we have no other way of dealing with it, we're not, dealing with the core of it, all we know how to do is go to our addiction. So we go back to the addiction, and it just gets worse and worse and worse, and all this shame and guilt and all this stuff. When I was 21, I'm a young adult, I woke up one morning, and I remembered what I had done the night before, which sometimes that didn't happen. And I remembered 2 things. Number 1, I remembered everything I had done. But secondly, I also remembered that I had promised myself that I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I was so sick, like sick. And I thought God hated me. There's no way God could love somebody like me who's done such horrible things and had such horrible things done to me. There's no way. And I didn't tell anybody. And I remember getting up that morning, and in my room, I'm a big girl, right? But I curled up in a tiny little ball, and I laid on the floor in my room as a college senior, and I just wished for death. Because I was so sick and I didn't know what to do. And it's amazing now that I have years on that experience, because that actually wasn't my bottom. I hit lower ones after that, but that was a defining moment in my life when I actually began to pray to die because I was so sick. I just didn't know what to do. Something that had happened years before that was actually God had sent somebody into my life who actually changed the course of my destiny. And that was a Catholic priest. Can we just get up for our priest here? Okay, yes. I mean, you talk about the power of one yes changing the course of people's lives. And God has sent this priest into my life when I wasn't ready to really engage with him yet, but he'd been a priest a long time. And that man met me and he became my friend. And over the course of time, I realized very quickly that number one, he just lived differently. And if you know anybody who's authentically holy, they just live differently, and it's captivating. And that man loved God, and you could ask him any question, and he was very open and honest. He came into my life and he would challenge me. He would tell me the truth about what I was doing. But you know what? He saw something in me that I didn't see myself. And when I looked at him and I looked at how he lived his life, and I looked at my own life, and I'm like, man, I don't know what you got, but I want that. Like, I don't know what it is, but I'm desperate for that. I want what you have. And he would just mentor me. He was the only man in my life beside my dad who didn't want something from me. He didn't want to use me. That man just loved me. And when I saw my own despair, my own brokenness, and my own self-hatred, he saw beauty, and he saw hope. And he would challenge me to live out my calling for greatness, this destiny. And it was his chance, his love for me, this day after day being a father to me, a spiritual father to me, that allowed me to hear Jesus Christ call me to be his bride. Me, somebody so broken, right? That Jesus Christ would call me to be with him forever for all eternity, that I give myself to him and, he gives himself to me. I get the way better end of the deal on that, right? But it's this course of one person authentically loving another that changes the history. The other part of that story, and this is the last thing I'm going to share with you today, is the story of my mother, my mom who raised me. And when I was very young, we got along very, very well. But as I got older and began to keep secrets and just became very depressed and things like that in my life, we did not get along anymore. And so by the time I was a senior in college, around that time I was just sharing with you, we were butting heads, right? And I was dating somebody my parents didn't like, and my mom said, if you continue to go out with this guy, we're gonna financially cut you off. Because even though I had a scholarship, I still need money from home. And I was like, oh, who needs money when you have love, right? So she's like, okay. So she cut me off financially, and I was poor for quite some time, right? Then she said, if you marry him, we're gonna disown you. So you won't be our daughter anymore, and you won't be welcome at any family functions, we'll disown you. And I was like, can I think about that one first? Let me get back to you. Okay, let me think about that one, okay? But until this time, my dad, my sweet father, had never said anything. And something when I speak to adults is I encourage dads to speak into the lives of their daughters, because we need to hear from you. We learn about what men are from our fathers. And my dad loved me very much, but he just didn't know how to express it, right? So he didn't say anything. One weekend, my parents came down to visit me in college, and my dad, I think, finally saw kind of for the first time how I was living my life. And he didn't say anything to me, and he went home. And it wasn't until many years later, after my dad died very suddenly, my mom said to me, sit down, because I want to tell you the rest of the story. She said, remember that time we came to visit you in college? And I was like, yeah, I remember. She said, here's what happened. Your dad and I went home that night. And she said, your dad looked at me and he said to me, I'm not going to give my daughter away to that man to be married. I'm not going to do it. And my mom knew for my dad to finally say that. She knew how disappointed he was in me. And my mom had already threatened me. She already financially cut me off. She already lectured me. She was going to disown me. And I was like, don't tell me what to do, right? So my mom said she did the last thing she could possibly think of. And she got out of bed that night, and in the house that I grew up in, we have a beautiful prayer room. And in that room, there's a statue of our Blessed Mother. And my mom got on her knees that night, and she entrusted me to our Blessed Mother, and she said to her, Mother, she's your daughter now, because there's nothing I can do for her. I can't help her, I can't heal her, I can't control her, and I give her to you, Mother, as your daughter. And I ask that you would watch over her, you would help her, and you would heal her. She's yours. And I tell you that completely unknown to me, I'm 800 miles away, I'm an alcoholic, I'm addicted to lust, my life is a train wreck. My mom began to pray to become a nun. And here I am today, right? Yeah. So I tell you that because I believe in the power of prayer. I believe in the power of Jesus Christ. I believe in healing and resurrection and redemption. And I believe in the fulfillment of happiness and joy, which ultimately comes seeing God face to face. And it is my prayer for you, and this is the only promise that I make. I promise you tonight before I go to sleep, I'm staying with the beautiful sisters here. I promise you that I will go in their chapel. And tonight before I go to bed, I will entrust every single one of you here to our Blessed Mother. And I promise you that I will pray for you every day for the rest of my life and into eternity. Because that's what it means to be a family, right? That's what it means to be communion. And it is my prayer for you that you speak out your secrets, that you live in the light, that no matter what's been done to you or what you've done in your life, Christ is not afraid and that he comes to heal. It is my prayer that you find in him the happiness that you're destined for, that you're looking for, because he loves you. So thank you very much. God bless you.